honored to be in this space with, you know, with you ladies, the heroines.
Okay, and I also see a nice young face here, Basil. Where is this young man, Basil? I just see
everyone, and to welcome everyone to this exciting event. And you know, it's the launch of the book titled Kauve, the Women's March of 1956. And I think it's exciting for me because you know, it's a book that tells, you know, it's our story. It's, you know, the book that tells the story of the Women's March, and it's beautiful that, you know, we have you know, some of the women, the mothers that led the struggle in 1956, but it's a book that has been put together.
Sometimes under the radar, because they thought of sort of as you know, capacity building or training. But I think
sorry, can I please ask
we have another one called the Academic
if you can mute
Mentorship Program.
people
And
in
it's all about
the session.
that we have a
You have the hosting
representative
powers. Please mute.
in terms of race, gender, level of qualifications.
Vanessa, can you please mute the participants? Okay, so I was saying it's a book that has been put together by a diverse group of young and old feminists, academics, activists, poets, and the diversity in the composition of the contributors is, you know, is also reflected in the style in which the book is written and presented. And quoting from the book, you know, it is said the book is multivocal, it's multilingual and intergenerational, close quotes. So the book tells the story of 1956 Women's March through visual art, poetry, songs, personal letters and essays, and, you know, and archives. And it is indeed a decolonial break. It is a way of writing and narrating it is a way of writing and narrating African history for the African communities, doing it in an accessible manner that resonates with young and old from different backgrounds. Using pictures, it illuminates the emotions and the bravery shown by those women who participated in the march. It uses photos, and photos often, they capture what cannot be fully captured, what cannot be fully expressed in words. Photos give power to the masses to be part of the storytelling, to run with their own imaginations and interpretations of the moment. This book is important as we celebrate the 64th anniversary of the Women's March. It is often said that memory is a dialogue, and as we commemorate the 64th anniversary of the 1956 Women's March, we continue to engage in conversations about the patriarchal domination of women in politics and in public spaces, and how that contributes to the continued oppression of women in post-apartheid South Africa. The question that is being revisited in the book by Professor Phumla Qola, which was asked earlier by Mebuitumelo Mofokeng, where are the women? The question underlines the invisibilization of women in our society and in the stories we tell about our history and our culture. For a long time, writing on South African history has been written from perspectives that undermine women's political importance and acumen, especially African working class women. And this book, it makes a break with that approach. It is quoting from the book, it is speaking for those whose names never made headlines and their participation would not be accounted for through personal experiences of the day. And with that, I would like to congratulate the contributors who took part in putting this book together. And we hope to see more projects like this that will, showcase the stories of women, the contributions of women in, in bringing democracy to this country. So I will hand over to Ms. Sophie de Bruin, as it was indicated that she will speak before Professor Marwana. Thank you and welcome.
What were you saying?
Okay, so I was saying that, as Baso said, you would be the next speaker before Professor Marwana.
Thank you for this opportunity and for bringing me here to be with you today. I must say I wasn't aware about this book. I wasn't aware about this book that is being launched today, but I'm pleased that there is such a book taking us back to the Women's March, and a book that will make it possible for our young people, our young women,
Yes.
our young daughters, and not only our daughters, but also our sons. Because we are living in a patriarchal society, and it would be good for the young boys and young men also to have the knowledge of this march and what was it all about. And I'm also grateful to see Mamrita here. We are very few who are still around, very few of us who are still around, that were in the march, that were part of the march. We participated in the march. And we are also spread all over our land or our country, living in different provinces. And the ones who are alive in these different provinces are frail and old and weak today. And like you were saying, which is mentioned in the book, that there are the unsung heroines, the ones that you don't read about, the ones that you don't hear about, and the ones that you don't see, who are also part of the march. But we are lucky to be the ones that are around, that can tell our story, that our young people can see that our eyes are still shining. And so I want to thank you on behalf of all the others that are not here, those invisible women that are not here to be part of this launch today. And yes, it is an intergenerational mix which brought this book about. And so it should be, because we want to teach our young women, our teenagers growing into young women, growing into women, how they must behave and how they must be role models to their own children and families. We have few role models today, and we know what our country is all about today. We never thought, as the older generation, that our country will come to be what it is today, almost like a lawless country. And you know the many things that doesn't sit well with us, that isn't good for our young people to witness and to be part of. So I want to say this is a very welcoming move of this book that was written. by so many youngsters and letters that are in it. And I thank you for this opportunity. I'm not sure if it's all that you want me to say or what is expected of me, but I want to thank you very much. To say, not only am I honored, but all our mothers, our sisters that are no more, our icons, the Martha Sulus and the Francis Barts and the Ruth Firsts and the Ellen Josephs, Mom Lillian and Goy, and all of our icons. You have honored me through them. And they are not happy where they are to know what has gone wrong in our country, because this is not what they stand for. This is not the multiracial or the non-racial countries that they fought for. If you remember the picture of the 4 women in the march, the 4 women in the forefront, you notice that it is an Indian woman, an African woman, a white woman, and a colored woman. And that is a vision that our 4 mothers envisioned for our country to be this non-racial country. That all the races of color should work together. The colored, the Indian, the African, the white. And that is why those 4 women are seen in the forefront there. A vision that they had for the future of our country, to be a non-racial country. But that vision was short-lived, because today we live in a country where we can't stand one another. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mom Sophie. We appreciate the contribution, and just to say that we also appreciate the role that all of you played in liberating the struggle, in liberating this country. All the contributions you've made, we are grateful for that. Okay, so I think the next speaker is supposed to be Professor Marwana, but I think we can move on to Mebu Dumelo if she's ready to say a few words on the book as one of the participants or the contributors in the book. Okay. Okay, sorry. Maybe Dumelo.
Yeah.
Okay. The floor is yours, maybe Dumelo.
Hello?
Yes, maybe Dumelo, we can hear you. Where are you now?
We do.
Is your camera on?
Yes. You can see me. We're all connected. Mom
Okay.
Sophia, Mom Rita, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for leaving the footprints for us to walk the paths you chose in your youth. There would be 3 aspects of my role in bringing about this book. I would like to briefly share how the ebook came about. Then we got a call, or I got a call from Dr. Mutobi Mutwatsi. And he said, here is the 64th anniversary of the Women's March. I did not even wait for him to finish his sentences. And he said, we must tell the story. And we've got a collage of images that we would like to interpret. And typical of me, like that 18-year-old of 1976, I jumped in like that day in 1977 at Morris Isaacson, when Midipi Writers Association came to render poetry and to inspire us young people. I am reminded by Mutobi that the way I responded to this invitation, it is with the same vigor I responded to when they asked for young people at Morris Isaacson to come out and render a poem of two. When I say I did not allow him to finish his sentence, I immediately told him how much we will move. Mam Sophie, Mam Rita, Mam Lien Boyi, how much will move into your hearts to feel what we were feeling that day, that we could feel what you were thinking, we could think with you. And therefore, the ebook is nothing but the interpretation of the images that document the history, the truth of the Women's March in 1956. Many of you carried your firstborns, your secondborns, our future husbands, future daughters, future teachers in your bellies, but you marched on. So this book, we call it the e-book, electronic book, but today, an hour or two ago, I got a book delivered at my doorstep. Yatikiti Kauve, hear the voice of the women. And this is what we tried to capture, to remember what it was like for you to march. I would like to go to read a little bit, an extract from the story. In this book, I tell the story of my grandmother. She told me the story before I could even think of what it was like, but that story stayed with me. I was a little girl when she told me the story. And I'm going to just read. So as I adjust, forgive me when I fall out of camera, this new norm technology, it's so new to us, but I'm gonna do it. If you can just twist the light to my text here. Mam Rita and Mam Sophie, this is for you. I was happy, Mam Rita, when I drove around and stopped at your house to tell you about this launch. I'm glad that you have been kept to join us. Here is the story of Kukuwaka. I salute you in the name of the thousands of women you marched with against the dome passes being extended to women, many of whom are not with us to witness the times we are living in. Kukuwaka, Kuku Josephina marched with you. She heeded the call as hundreds of women mobilized their lot, as represented in the images that tell the story of that day, shouting in high-pitched voices, catching their breaths as they jumped, watching their steps in the rocky, dusty streets of Pendes Coast, sending men to the sides of the uneven pavements as they soared in numbers like an army, charging at the enemy. She and her neighbors joined in, pushing forward to hear why basadi ba emisitse menwana ya bona ikiti ba na le feite ba kukile misisi ya bona o kare ba ilo tshela noka e tletse. Sometimes they were not hearing what these women were saying, and they were wondering what is the murmuring all about, until Kuku Josephina Kukuaka heard them saying, Maibuye Africa. And they marched forward. How can I translate this childhood memory? How can I translate this childhood memory? The story and the vision of my large-figured Kuku Josephina joining in the protest against passes. I was little, watching her demonstrate how they did it. That story, that image stuck with me. I believe it shaped me. It sharpened the fierce woman in me who would be born in years to come. I was not yet born, but I could imagine these women with children on their backs, some carrying Maitubula Abone in the womb so strong that not even the thought of freedom and his tyrannical rulers would do when they charged at him. I look at these images and I still see and feel Kuku's every heartbeat and her heavy breathing. Akhefusa, like the day she was amassing her strength to fight a war defined by the fiery spirits of the marching women, as she took me through the events of that historical day and the contented heart that made her face radiate with joy, even when she was telling her story about a struggle against the brutal apartheid system whose scars still exist to this day. This collage of images invite me. I don't battle to sense the events of that day. Instead, I am filled with rage at what I see happening today as I write my reflections and my interpretation of these images. Kuku marched with you, Mam Rita and Mam Sophie, against the Dompas, against the oppression of African men being extended to women, against the injustices that reduce her African people into nothing. I am enraged by those women who continue to dig their inherited, self-imposed white supremacy claws into the flesh of the Black man. I'm disgusted by the lack of their inherited, self-imposed white supremacy claws. I am disgusted by the lack of leadership, from a woman who should have held Tipaka Fabukaling to protect them from COVID-19 pandemic, to protect our children from the COVID-19 pandemic. I am filled with rage at the exploiters of my people because they suckle the brutality of their forefathers and mothers. They're heirs of a system that taught them that Kuku would be their washer women for generations to come. Yet they found it befitting to wrap themselves in the loins of young sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons. I will go into the picture that Mam Sophie refers to, and I will try to show it. It might not come out very well. When you look at the book, there's Mam Rahima Musa, there's Mam Lilian Ngoi, there's Mam Lilian Ngoi, there's Mama Helen Joseph, and Mam Sophia, who is still with us today. And therefore, in interpreting this picture, I leave this poem for generations to come, the present and generations to come. With this image, I tell our young generation, when you get your book and you can look at this picture, you will see it was not Helen Joseph in the front. It was not Rahima Musa was not behind her, nor in front of Sophia de Brey. No, Mama Lilian Ngoi was not behind these women. Look, my children, they stood side by side. Look again, it is not Helen Joseph standing on top of Rahima Musa or Sophia de Brain, nor all of them standing on the back of Mama Lillian Gold. Look closely, my children. They stood side by side as equals. This image is the inspiration of the clause in the world-acclaimed constitution that would make women of South Africa equal. That makes us equal. Koko khalema ka bogale kgatelo ya basadi ba thari e ntsho. You are the women who stood side by side. Women whose thumbs were raised high, fighting for the emancipation of women, the emancipation of African women. Lona bokoko baba retala. No regrets. Why the regression? Why this status quo? Why this inequality? Straydom and Verwoerd are no more. Pasopangele oppressors of African women. Maila kaka, majamu. Naki mutawu, ke mutawu ya mutshehadi, ke mutawu wa mapirata sefata tshukudu. Ya ere ha etsetse ha mantila tilane, a fihli a futswe le bohobe ka metsi, ha re the, a re ke thelleng ke di mutawu.
Thank you so much, Mebu Dumelo. We appreciate your, the reading. I think Prof. Marala is ready to give us an address now after Mebu Dumelo. Prof. Marala.
Thank you very much.
Prof.
Thank you very much, MC, for facilitating this engagement. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of the role player, one of the principal role players in the Women's March, Mama Sophie de Brain, who has joined us here at the University of Johannesburg. It is actually quite a pity that COVID is with us, because we had huge plans for an honorary doctorate for Mama Sophie de Brain, but obviously we couldn't do it because of COVID, and we hope that as soon as COVID is behind us, we can be able to have a grand ceremony where we'll be able to do that. I also would like to acknowledge Mama Witumelo, who just gave us an excellent rendition. You know, it just tells us that as a society, we have a great deal to celebrate. As a society, the depth of leadership in our society is such that there's no reason why we should be in any form of a crisis as a society. And of course, we highly appreciate Jayas for convening this. Jayas is doing a series of biographies that are on our leaders, so that history cannot be forgotten. So I would like, in that regard, to acknowledge the presence of Professor Wongani Ngulunga, Dr. Wongani Ngulunga, the director of Jayas. I have to put it up front that ever since he took over as the director of Jayas, Jayas has moved to a higher level it is no longer just a UJ institution, is absolutely a national treasure for all of us to reflect on who we are. And also I would like to acknowledge the presence of other role players here who have gathered today. This book is actually quite very important. Long through South Africa's tumultuous history, women have played a crucial role. Long through South Africa's past, these women have often been erased. Our annals and archives often reflect the inherent misogyny in the retelling of our history. The writing of our historical narratives reflect this deep bias. From the earliest moments of our history to the 1956 Women's March, to the Sharpeville Massacre, to the student uprisings of 1976, to Rhodes Must Fall, and Fees Must Fall, and to protest outside the World Economic Forum, women have shaped our struggle. Yet, these names are so often mentioned as afterthoughts. Others are exiled, forgotten, and erased. The names of Umama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Umama Albert Sisulu, Albertina Sisulu, and Umama Adelaide Tambo were often remembered in conjunction with the man. Yet they were leaders in their own right. The male presence permeates through our stories, often leaving out much of the reality. As African historian Thando Sipuye explains, the names and identities of young women rarely appear even when victims of the 16 June massacre are evoked in public dialogues, intellectual discourse, or media reports. These Black women are continuously rendered invisible by the entire system. They simply don't exist. They are not regarded as worthy subjects of his story. Even when pictures of the June 16 events are shown on any of our public platforms, the selective gendering of the images used is quite apparent. In the media, in academia, and in political spaces, the historic images used to tell the story are those with largely male students, close quote. In a country battling a scourge of violence against women, higher female unemployment rates, and skewed inequality, we have an obligation to combat this systematic erasure and ongoing pushing to the periphery of women. As the retelling of history will often have you believe, women were not mere accomplices or junior partners by any means. These protagonists acted on their own volition and in line with the dictates of the pursuit of justice and inequality. In recent thought piece for Undefeated, Roger Rivers said, and I quote, "Often history and critics overlook the work of women because it occurs in the sphere of domestic rather than in hot streets behind a megaphone and podium. Women's lives become ignorable detail subsumed in a portrait of something like a movement, a march where the emphasis on the leaders, often male, who are making the speeches, meeting with the press, and politicos standing next to the president while flash bulbs flare in the recording of these great meetings, close quote. This is perhaps why the March of 1956 holds so much power. It subverted this very narrative. Here, women were in hot streets behind megaphones and podiums, and here they overtly effected change. As we reflect on what is now known as Women's Day, the photographs and reflections that accompany them in Kauve highlight the continued relevance of bridge building and never-ending work of socio-economic justice. Just as importantly, it will vivify these historic figures and accomplish the necessary task of reminding us that extraordinary task feats are accomplished by ordinary human beings who choose to be uncompromising while injustices abound. As Minister Ayanda Dlodlo put it in 2015, and I quote, "We are here today owing to the sacrifices of the heroines who fought for the emancipation of women. Our country will forever be indebted to them. Due to their selfless acts, South African women have taken their rightful place in parliament, government, the private sector, and civil society," close quote. As we look out from what seems to be the abyss, this is a message we must hold on to. This year, even as our country effectively came to a standstill in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, we woke up to the news of instances of gender-based violence. A year after the tragic death of Uyinene Mkhwetjana, we continue to lose more of our own. Against the backdrop of the World Economic Forum being hosted in Cape Town last year, there seemed to be a glimmer of hope that the voices against violence would be heard. Femicide was declared a national crisis by our president in 2019, yet we are without doubt in the same place as we were then right now. It is difficult to fathom that this is still a reality. According to the UN coordinator, Bekele Thomas, in 2017-2018, an average of 110 rapes were recorded on a daily basis. There were 2,930 women murdered in 2017-2018 year. This is, of course, just what is reported. The fear of reporting and facing up to a relentless justice system requires acts of courage and bravery. We are yet to develop compassionate and enabling environments in police stations, in courts, and even wider society. According to statistics from the Global Peace Index, violence in South Africa is similar to countries at war or conflict. This is frightening that our violence index is so high that the comparison is equated to war zones. At times, one wonders if there will ever be any abatement in the violence that permeates our society. It is against this context that the high teas, the pink campaigns, and the hashtags associated with Women's Month and Women's Day are so often seen as a farce. It is certainly a fraught contradiction for South African women. Still, the day has significance for all the history it holds and for the quintessential message it holds. More than 60 years ago, the war cry, "Watinta awafazi, watinta imbokodo," reverberated through the nation. You have tampered with the women, you have struck a rock. For those who do not understand IsiZulu. On the 9th of August 1956, a biting cold morning, hordes of women made their way from Johannesburg to the Union Buildings, the seat of the apartheid government in Pretoria. With bated breath and deafening silence, 20,000 women from all parts of the country watched Helen Joseph, Lillian Goy, Rahima Musa, and Mama Sophie Williams, who is here today with us, deposit 100,000 petitions addressed to Prime Minister J.J. Stradom. In the throes of apartheid in 1952, the South African government introduced the Native Laws Amendment Act. It was an offense for any African to be in any urban area for more than 72 hours unless they were in possession of a pass that had details of the holder's identity, employment, place of legal residence, payment of taxes, and permission to be in the urban areas. For the first time in South African history, Black women were expected to carry passes too. The African National Congress began the Defiance Campaign, a national campaign against unjust laws, and called its members to action. The Federation of South African Women, a broad-based women's organization, was launched on 17 April 1954 in Johannesburg and drew in prominent activists. This was in essence the birth of the protest. As historian Cheryl Walker describes it, many of the African women wore traditional dress. Others wore the Congress colors, green, black, and gold. Indian women were clothed in white saris. Many women had babies on their backs, and some domestic workers brought their white employers' children along with them. Throughout the demonstration, the huge crowd displayed a discipline and dignity that was deeply impressive, close quote. As we remember this legacy, we must concede that it is unacceptable that we find ourselves each year making cliche statements about gender-based violence, spending huge amounts of money on 10-day campaigns with rising statistics, screaming headlines announcing yet another incident of horror. It can be argued that the deep-seated structural inequality in our society, patriarchal dominance, and a host of other sociological problems are responsible for us being on this never-ending path of violence. So often, the voices of women become submerged akin to white noise. As women of 1956 subverted the narrative, how do we do that also? This is, of course, is why contributions such as these are so imperative. We need stories of women written by women, compiled by women. As we begin to reclaim the African narrative and tell our own stories, we have to ensure that we tell the entire story. As anti-apartheid activist Fatima Mia once said, regardless of how many years we have spent in this life, we must get up and shout, close quote. As I conclude, I would like to thank the following people, Professor Pumla Gola. She wrote the foreword. Mutobi, the man who met me and say, here is a project, are you willing to take it? And I said, without a doubt. And just a few months later, less than 6 months later, just over 6 months later, we are here launching the book. And in these 6 months, there was COVID. So there was no obstacle that was going to stop the publication of this book. When during the COVID, it was communicated to me that this book is only going to be electronic, I said, no. This is the book that deserves to sit in our shelves, not just to sit, but to be read so that our people can be able to understand where we come from and draw from the inspiration, the necessary energy that is required for us to defeat the problems that have besetted us. And lastly, I would also like to thank Dr. Baso Nzenze, young man, 23 years old with a PhD. who took quite vigorously this project to its completion. So thank you very much. And I think we need more stories like this about women written by women. Ngiyabonga, bayadanki, kiyaliwa. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Marana. Thank you for the insightful comments that you've made and the warm welcome to everyone who's in this session. The next person in the program is Lebu Mashile, who is a poet, but I think we're going to listen to a recording of, I think, of her poem. Vanessa? Vanessa?
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chap.
Okay, so how do we stop this? Okay, colleagues, thank you for this presentation, Vanessa. I think the next speaker on the program is Professor Pumla Dineo Gola. So I'd like to call Professor Pumla Gola. And Vanessa, if you could remove what's on the screen now, I would appreciate that, please. If we could stop. Yeah, thank you. Professor Phumla Qola, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Tswaidi. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am, and it's wonderful to be here. I'm just going to say all protocol observed. It is a, and then secondly, I want to thank the executive at UJ for hosting us and JIAS's participation and partnership in this project. But most importantly, I think, since it is a book party, I'd like to say a big congratulations and just thank you to the editors and compilers of this book, who I think have given us all such an enormous gift. I was a very, very small part of this process. So congratulations and thank you to Buitumelo Mofokeng, Tobi Motse, and Atambile Masola, who have, so I will not take up too much time. I think that this is a very important book for a variety of reasons. We often speak in this country as though women's contributions to history are a footnote, are supplementary to something else, and that these are histories that can be told in very narrow, tidy ways. I think the enormous contribution of this book and the presence, of course, at this launch and in the book of Ms. Sophia Williams-De Bruyn, who was one of the leaders of this march, is incredibly remarkable. I am going to maybe embarrass one of the editors a little bit and that's Buitumelo Mofokeng. This book is she's hiding her face. She doesn't even know what I'm going to say. She's already embarrassed in anticipation. I think that it's really, so Buitumelo Mofokeng, many years ago in 1989, wrote an essay that was incredibly important, and I talk about it in my foreword to Kauve. An essay that asked, where are the women? It was a review essay for a very important collection which had been partly edited by Mutobi Mutlatse, but it was larger than I think its influence in the world of South African letters, its influence in how we think about the specific ways in which we write about women and think about women and evaluate women's contributions to the making of South Africa, to the making of canons, to kind of critically thinking about our pasts and our presents and our futures, cannot be overstated. In that essay, she asks, where are the women? And she's asking, where are the women in a variety of ways, which have been absolutely critical, certainly to my own and probably taught in the last 2.5 decades in the South African Academy. And the question she's asking, of course, forces the way in which Mofokeng asks this question is not just to ask about what women did in history, where women were, which is important. She asked the question about how we make sense of women's contributions. She forces us, so she argues that the question, where are the women, is a question that we have to ask ourselves constantly in order to guard against erasure, to guard against writing in the academy as though we can theorize without thinking about women as theorists, as though we can think about history without thinking about women history makers and leaders. And so it is unsurprising to me that this book is that Mutube Mofokeng is one of the compilers and editors of this book, because her own trajectory as a writer in staff writer, as someone who's broken many barriers across multiple sectors in our society, makes sense that she would still be asking and answering and giving us a way to think about answering the question about where are the women. Muthobi Motloa also, perhaps I'll embarrass him too, because he has an equally big, I'm sure this is not why the editors of this book wanted me to speak at this launch, and they might well regret it slightly after this. Muthobi Motloa, of course, himself, an incredibly important, I mean, many people in contemporary South Africa perhaps remember him or know him remember his role as a publisher. But of course, one of Muthobi Motloa's most significant contributions historically is through inviting, interrogating, forcing us to think about the specific ways in which we think about Black creative and intellectual thought in South Africa. I'm talking, for example, about his books, Forced Landing, Forced Landing, where he makes interventions not just in terms of literary history, but also in terms of how we think about Black intellectual presence in South Africa and what that means in terms of contesting space, in terms of defining and redefining aesthetics, and also in terms of systems of value. But also, of course, his edited collection, Forced Landing. And so it's, again, not surprising to me that someone who has thought so much about the relationships between the different ways of telling and of engaging with history and the different modes through which meaning is made and power is created, is also someone who is one of the compilers of this compilers and editors of this collection. It seems to me perfectly consistent with much of his life's work. Atambile Masola, the third compiler and editor of this collection, significantly younger, but someone who also constantly in her work, who shares the same discipline as me, a literary scholar and as a poet as well, is someone who's one of her biggest political and intellectual contributions has been through the notion of what she calls ukuzilanda, and thinking about ukuzilanda as a way to think about women's presences and connections and how exactly we read and think about women's histories, and how we make sense of women's historical presences. And so I think the three of them are actually a wonderful team, a wonderfully suitable team, given their various work, the various kind of tentacles that their work reaches out into. It is, I think it has been an enormous, have these particular people be the ones who conceive of this project that invites us to think about the Women's March of 1956 in a variety of ways, not as an exceptional, strange moment in South African history, but as one that is connected to us in a variety of ways. A book that brings together visual imagery and what we think those images might mean and might be about, and beautiful prose written by the various contributors in this text. And so I think it is fitting. I think unfortunate, rather. Well, not unfortunate, I think it's a little sad that we have to do this through Zoom because of COVID, but I think perhaps also at another level, it is the fact that we're able to do it, the fact that these three people were able to put this remarkable project together, a project that reaches into the future, that challenges, that invites us to think about this past in interesting ways, think about women in interesting ways, think about women's leadership, women's imagination, women's organization, women's theorization, the incredible ways in which women pass on traditions in ways that are not acknowledged. I mean, for example, if you think about Mufugeng's essay, and this is about how her nkhono also was one of these women. So it isn't mysterious from outer space that Sophia Williams de Brey, Lillian Boyi, Raima Musa, and Helen Joseph found in outer space and led to the union buildings. These women's influence and ideas and children and grandchildren are everywhere. And perhaps then part of the great gift, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, part of the great gift of this book is that it allows the odd, loud, questioning, creative women of subsequent generations to be able to understand that despite the constant accusation that radical, transgressive women are, it gives us one of the many reinforcements of that there is a long lineage of creative history making, questioning in the past, and many, many future that those successive generations of women continue to create. I think I'm going to stop there. I think I've already taken up way more time than I had initially taken. Thank you very much, Malihok.
Thank you very much, Pumla, and thank you for giving us, the background into, the contributors of the book. I think, it gives us, better insight into, the book itself and, the story of, putting the book together. So we appreciate those contributions very much. I think the next speaker in the program is Mam Doli Kunene. So we are going to play a recorded message from Mam Doli Kunene. But before we do that, I would like to make an announcement that we were trying to play a recorded poem by Lebu Mashile. So there was a problem with the sound, as you would have seen. So we're going to, I think Vanessa has already done that. She's put the link to the poem, so you can look at it or listen to it at your own time. But for now, then we are going to listen to Mam Doli Kunene's message. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Vanessa.
Tina Sisulu, Helen Joseph, and Sophia de Brey. What is the struggle without women? I praise women like Lillian Ngoyi, Albertina Sisulu, Helen Joseph, and Sophia de Brey. I praise all women who were there but never mentioned in the books of history. I praise Mama. Won't you celebrate these women? The moon disappeared and the sun rose on the day. Their magic was felt right in front of Postman Station. They stood firm with confidence and marched towards the Union building. When the police realized that these women were not turning back, the battle began and their victory changed time. They did not mix their words. They were very clear. What take up some people believe in active protesting, such as marching, tackling these issues. I think we should tackle these issues I think as people, it's time we should acknowledge and start to take actions as Perhaps part of the problem is that we think we're nothing. We feel worthless. However, let us take the lesson learned from a march. Be it that you're broken or strong, let us all stand together to change things. In order for a structure, system, or even organization to change, we need to fight the system united towards one goal. If you're in the front line as a woman, use your power and authority to protect all women and empower them. Remember this, the discourse is our own. We can either complain, protest, or even take active action to change the situation. Or just be hopeful things will happen by sitting at home. But I say let us stand united. Let us work together in harmony and remember the lesson learned in 1956. Watita mafasi, watiti mabonke. Basali kono ke basali ba 1956.
Thanks, Vanessa, for that audio. I think now we'll move on to Pamela Charekwa. Is Pamela here? Pamela, are you here?
Hi, everyone. Yes, Pamela will join us now.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me?
Hi, Pamela.
How are you? Hello, May. I'm so overjoyed to be part of the Kauve launch. Not just that, but I'm so proud to be one of the contributors. This book that I'm holding, it's not just a book to me. This is history. These are emotions combined together. When Ram Toby approached me, I asked him, how am I supposed to start being proudly Zimbabwe? And he said to me, music, Pamela, music. So as I was sleeping, I just woke up in there. A song came to me, a song came to my mind. Watenda bafazi, watendi mbodo. When you strike a woman, you strike a rock. Then everything just started flowing. Everything started flowing. I'm so proud of our mothers. I just want to say the march is still on. I want to read what I wrote in the book where I express myself saying, I want to believe a woman carries life in her, whether black, white, Indian, or any race. When a woman fights, it's not her battle, but her children's. So I want to believe that the fight which was fought by our mothers was made for us, is benefiting us. The march is still on. I thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. And I think our last speaker is Dr. Mutobi Mutlwatse. Welcome, Dr. Mutlwatse. I think you are muted.
La Soha.
Re tsuile ntate, lona le tsuile jwang ntate?
Realika. I'm trying to restrain myself from being emotional. I'm supposed to be a publisher who is reserved, who is in control of his emotion or her emotion. This episode is close to my heart and has been so for 41 years from the moment I, as a 29-year-old journalist, interviewed Mangoi in her own house. And I saw and heard history in the making. And I've never forgotten the animation, the excitement she expressed about that day. But the most important thing she said was that she had been liberated by the children of 1976. She stood on her veranda looking at Orlando Stadium. She says, on the morning of June 17, she knew that we would be free one day through the children. She says, I can now feel that liberation is coming, my child. Wanaka. So I am saying I have kept the memory of the event through Me Mangoi, and that's why I'm obsessed with making sure her message is never forgotten through the generation of the other mothers. So I've now shared it with the younger generation because Frantz Fanon did say each generation must fulfill its mission or betray it. And I would hope younger generation would live up to Frantz Fanon's dictum that we are the history that we would like to be, as well as the changes. So I am thankful for the Vice Chancellor of Johannesburg, Professor Marwala, for hearing my call and then engaging the university as well as Jayas and Dr. Bongani Ngulunga together with his assistant, Dr. Basu Nzenze. This would not have been possible were it not, it was a team effort, and the university funded the research for the ebook, but then Professor Marwala decided to go one step further to say he would want to have a limited print edition. So I am eternally grateful on behalf of all the contributors behind and as well as involved in the writing process that we did not allow COVID-19 to overtake us or to betray us and floor us. And the spirit of the mothers of 1956 prevailed and enabled all of us to be together, even if it was digitally, to produce what I believe is a wonderful treasure and legacy in the national interest. So, kere, likamuso bagaitsu, reality.
Thank you, Ndate Mutraute. And indeed, they say memory is power, and it is through this memory that, you know, we are here today celebrating the launch of this book. Thank you for, you know, for keeping this memory alive. And I'm gonna open the floor for questions, comments, and you are also free to write in the comments section. Okay, so I'm gonna take the first three comments and then comments or question, and then we'll let our contributors respond to your questions or your comments. Okay, so you can use the icons here to raise your hand, and yeah, and I will note your hand. I am so not good with with this fourth IR business people. So yeah. I'm gonna do my best. Okay, so I'm gonna read, there is a comment from David Makema, and he says, congratulations to all the participants, organizers, and a special salute to our stalwarts, Ma'am Rita and Ma'am Sophie. We are all grateful for your sacrifices. It is a challenge to our present women leaders who must nurture and deepen our democracy. They have the challenge. Okay, sorry, I've just, sorry. Okay, so they have the challenge. They have the challenge. They have to challenge the corruption in all its forms, inequality, poverty, and unemployment. As women, they must hold the knife at its sharpest edge and stand up for the truth. Kauve is a baton by our stalwarts, represented by Ma'am Sophie and Rita, to the younger and future generations. We Tumele Mofokeng, you are great to have shared your memories, as the seed of liberation is well planted in many of our families, where a woman is an important rock for our society. So that's a comment from David. Sorry, let me go back. That's a comment from Makema, David Makema. So I don't know if people want to make comments or questions. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for people to, to prepare their comments or questions, maybe we can give a moment to Mayor Rita Nzanga, as I think Ms. Sophie had suggested earlier that we give her some space to make a comment for for the audience. Merita.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be with you. I'm so happy that today our young people, especially women, they are not just interested in making tea and making supper at home, but they have work to do. They've done a lot, they've done as well. So proud. I'm proud of you. Please keep it up. And don't forget to teach the young people who are still coming in, the young ladies, so that this must never disappear. It should stay with us for good. I thank you. I don't want to waste your time because it's already clear from there. But now we are old and we are happy to see the young people coming up and doing such wonderful work. Amanda.
Amanda, Mama. Okay. Thank you, Merita. Okay.
I've opened my mic for my statement. Chair. Yes, just to say, we are, as part of this project, going forward to 2026. You can imagine what does 2026 mean. We would like on the website when it goes live that all of our people access the website for Kauve, whereby we are calling for more people to submit names of the more than 20,000 women who marched, who without us telling their stories like I did with the story of my Kuku Josephina, that their grandmothers, their great grandmothers their stories will never be told. So we would like to acknowledge the other women whose names are not making headlines, whose names are not mentioned in any books, in any research work. You will find an example there how to submit that information, and where there are photos or references or the very dumb passes. We would love people to participate in this project, taking it forward. You'll find an example of Mama Kuno Munyaz, who marched with Mana Aida Mokotu. Mam Rita and Mam Sophia would know Mam Aida Mokotu, I'm sure. But it shows that there is history in our homes. The daughter of Mam Kuno, Mama Kuno, she's still alive. She's 82 years old. She needs her children to ask her questions about the role of our families in the struggle for liberation, so that our elders' minds can be stimulated to play back to the time. So here we are, we've got that beautiful story of Mama Kuno, whose daughter is now 82 years old, and her daughter is 48 years old. So through conversations amongst our generations, we will be able to reach out for more. So that facility is available on the website, and forgive us if it is not activated as I'm speaking, but it will soon be activated. And would appreciate that mass participation to ensure that we answer the question, where are the women? And we know we'll never answer it satisfactorily, but let us endeavor to bring those women forward into the center of our history. Thank you. I thought I should mention that.
Yeah. Thank you, maybe Tumelo. Whilst we're still waiting for questions and comments, maybe I can ask the contributors to, just to speak to the, the idea of, the approach taken in the book, because I quite liked, the different style that you present in the book, the way in which you present in the book, and as I was saying in the opening, that it's a style that is that is very much accessible, and it's different from what we are used to in the academic space, where the book is just theory and writing and just words, But what you've done in the book is you have pictures, and having pictures, it gives you much more, in terms of, getting into the story, and, getting a feeling, the texture of, what was happening, at that moment, during this 1956 march. So I was hoping that, perhaps you could just, speak to that as a collective, and, what led you to, this approach that you've taken in the book.
Madam Chair, perhaps before we give away our secrets, because some are to copy, may I first ask that 18-year-old marcher to explain how she felt on that day, actually, how she became involved and was the youngest of them all at 18, and today she's sprightly 82. How did Mom Sophia feel and took part in this historic march? So I would want her to tell us in her own words how she felt.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, we can hear you very well, Ma'am Sophie.
Now, how I became involved. Yes, and I was very young. In both marches, the 55 one. I think you also remember the 55 march was only comprised of the women of the Transvaal. And the women of the Transvaal, after the 55 march, felt that they were left out and that they want this bigger march where all the, of course we didn't have the 9 provinces, we had the 4 provinces, Transvaal, Natal, the Cape, and the Orange Free State. I think the young people must know that piece of history, that there were only 4 provinces then. Now we have 9. So all the women of our country got involved in the 1956 march. I was the organizer of the Colored People's Congress. And another piece of history that our young people must know is that we worked or organized and mobilized under our own congresses, or we carried out the struggle according to our race group. Because you remember that time we had the Population Registration Act, and we also had the, there's another act that I've just forgotten now. So under these acts, different race groups were not allowed to feature or to work in one another's, in the other race groups' communities. So we worked as a Congress movement whereby the Congress Alliance said that we must all organize our own people in our own groups. So there was formed the Colored Congress in the group which I fell into, and the Indian Congress was there, the African National Congress was there, and so was the Congress of Democrats. And the Congress of Democrats comprised of the white group people. So all of these different congresses joined what was called the consultative committee. In other words, the consultative committee were where the heads of these congresses met. So the different congresses will meet and discuss and debate their problems. And this is how I was, because of my work in the trade union movement, I was singled out to be the organizer of the Colored Congress. And there was also the other act I've forgotten was the Group Areas Act. But the Population Registration Act was an act which the Congress movement felt that we can organize the colored people. It was a strategy. So I was the organizer of the Colored Congress. I was organizing the youth. I was organizing the women. I was organizing the Congress as a whole, making them aware of the ills of the time under which we lived. Then came the extension of passes. And this is where I was chosen because of my work in the Congress, Colored Congress. I was chosen to be part of the Federation of South African Women. And then we mobilized and organized around the coming March. And we traveled the length and the breadth of our country. We didn't have money, we didn't have resources, we had nothing. I don't know if you have enough time now to listen to my long story, but to cut it short was to say, finally, when we succeeded in convincing and organizing and mobilizing the women, got them to Pretoria. We didn't get them to Pretoria, they got themselves to Pretoria. The young people will be very amazed and they will be very surprised. Perhaps they will be very sad to hear how we did it, having nothing. There was no donors with deep pockets like today. How did they come to Pretoria? They came in rickety cars, buses, and as we were doing the rounds with Helen Joseph, Raima Musa, and Lillian and Goy doing the rounds, visiting the different provinces, like in the province where I come from, Port Elizabeth, you would find the women waiting for us because they will have to give their reports how they were doing with the organizing. We would come there on a Sunday, having traveled from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape in a little car, a mini minor of Helen Joseph, which she named called Congress Connie. I don't know if Comrade Matobi has got that name in his book. Congress Connie. It belonged to Helen Joseph. We come to Port Elizabeth, the women will be waiting for us, where they will have their branch meeting, and we will be here listening to their reports. One woman will be getting up to go and make tea for us, or coffee, not for us alone, but for the whole meeting. And you will pay a tikkie for that cup of tea or that cup of coffee. And you will pay a tikkie for a scone, which is a sixpence, and that is a fundraising. The other women elsewhere will be crocheting and knitting garments, baby garments, and selling it. Other women will be cooking their chicken, making a curry chicken stew and mealie rice, which they will sell for a shilling, fundraising. Amongst themselves, using their own ingredients, their own chickens, their own tea and coffee. So that is how we work. And the women of Port Elizabeth paid 80 or 90 pounds sterling for 2 railway coaches to bring the women to Pretoria. No convenient, air-conditioned luxury coaches with curtains taking the sun away from them as they drive through the heat or the bushy land to Pretoria. No coaches, luxury coaches, 2 railway coaches for 90 or 80 pounds sterling they paid out of their own fundraising. And so did many other women from the other provinces find their way by their own steam. And they carried their own scuff-tins, which is their lunch boxes, with a piece of pap and a piece of fish, or some sandwiches, or whatever. There was no fancy pack waiting for them. Like today, in the luxury coaches, you will find a pack of breakfast. And when you leave, you will find a pack of lunch. So those were the things that the women didn't have. For whatever they wanted, for whatever they did, they worked for it themselves. Coming to Pretoria, some of the women were locked up. You talk about 20,000. There were more than 20,000. But some of the women were locked up because they were not familiar with Pretoria. And so their way to the union buildings. And so those that came by foot or from the outskirts areas of Transvaal, they didn't know their way to the union buildings. And so they asked the policemen, those policemen that were around, they asked for directions. And the directions was given to them, oh, you say you want to go to the union buildings? I'll show you. Come, let me show you. And they would take them by the hand, lead them to the van and push them into the van and shut the van. So they were, and keep them there until after the march. So it wasn't only 20,000, there were more, but they weren't at the march. They were kept in the police offices or in the cells for the day and released tonight. How did I feel being in the union building, standing on the amphitheater as a young 18-year-old? Many times reporters and journalists used to ask me, weren't you afraid you will be locked up? How did you feel? And I said there was no time for fear. I didn't know what it was because there was the excitement. There was also a sense of adventurism. I was young, energetic, full of energy. Ellen Joseph and Rahima Musa, they were my mother's age. And I was the youngest amongst all of them. And so, when I stood there in the amphitheater and looked at this army of women, disciplined women, gracious women, dedicated women, the tears rolled down my eyes, from my eyes. It was like, at last, what we've worked so hard for all these months has manifest. Because here they are. Look at them, all of them. And a lump came into my throat of joy to see that we had succeeded. And that is how I felt. That is how I felt.
Thank you, Mom Sophie. Yeah, that's very moving and very powerful. Yeah.
But while I'm on the floor, I'd like to I'd like to very much endorse and associate myself with what Mamrita had said before, fully associating myself, and also what Bunte Poito Melo had said. I'm referring to Mamrita talking about our young women and feeling very happy at the way they are carrying on their work quietly, successfully, and joyfully perhaps. And yes, Mamrita, we did try, I would say try our best. We tried our best. I think we managed to lay a foundation. If it's solid, I hope so. We laid a foundation for the young generation like yourselves. And I think we've succeeded in many ways. Here you are today, proud of you working here today, in your own steam, in the way you've managed to set up businesses, you've managed to go to school, high school. I didn't even finish my high school when I was that activist in 1956. You have high school education, you have university education. The women made it possible for you. In our days, we were trained in schools to become domestic servants. And nannies and all of those kind of things. And we are proud of you that you have weathered the storm even when the funds in your homes were little. How you did it, because you were determined to be what you want to be. Today the sky is a limit. But I say the sky is no longer the limit, because you can become even an astronaut moving under the sky or above the sky or in between the clouds. You've managed to reach the highest position in government, in the private sector, although we still need to have many more of you in high places in the private sector. You are in the academias. I can say that you are all over because of your determination and your commitment to be what you want to be. And so I too congratulate all of you, even if I don't know who you all are. And especially when I see, when I'm invited to these many gala dinners, where I'm sometimes asked to be the keynote speaker. And I look at the tables laden with the most beautiful silver and crockery and white tablecloths and all of the grand things and the chandeliers and all of those things. The beauty of it all makes me so proud to see how we have evolved. I won't speak about during our time. Those things were not there. I am proud to see that our people, our young people, men and women, can enjoy the luxuries that was made possible for them by themselves and by others. And so you must continue to excel. Must continue to excel in whatever you touch. And to Bontemila, I want to say thank you also for taking us through memory lane and for bringing to our attention of all of our stalwarts that are not mentioned today. And like I said in the beginning, they are there, they are everywhere, except that they are now frail, they are not very healthy, some of them can't walk anymore, some of them aren't treated very well, and so on and so forth. But you are quite right that there must be a roll call of all those that were in the march, amongst those 20,000. They're not all dead, they're still around. So we must have that roll call. I think Mamrita will remember that at the last graveyard walk that we did together. We called on the women to come forward with names. And the Ahmad Kathrada Foundation and the foundation that my children established in my name and in my late husband's name have also joined with the Ahmad Kathrada Foundation to say we need to have the names of all of those women that are invisible. I think we need to stop there now. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invite, and thank you for being with you, to share with you. Thank you for making it possible. Mamrita, my friend, my sister, stay well. We've been too quiet to one another, but keep up your health and look after yourself. Can she hear me? I don't know.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mom Sophie. And really, I think our generation is grateful to the selfless sacrifices, that were made by your generation. And indeed, I mean, many of us, you've opened the doors for many of us. And I agree with Mom Rita's comment that, we've had the opportunity to stand on your shoulders, and open the doors, So Mam Rita is saying, thank you for being our giants so we can stand on your shoulders. Today we are engineers, mathematicians, and now accountants and financial analysts because of you, And I think for many of my generation and those that come after me, it is people like you, that have made this life possible for us. And, you made the sacrifices, without, expecting any rewards. And at the time, like you saying that, when you were 18 years old, you had no fear, you had the feeling of adventure, there was no clear indication that, we would have this democracy that we now have, in the country. And, we would like to thank you for those sacrifices. So I think I'm being mindful of the time that, we left with 1 minute before 6 o'clock. So I would like to ask, the contributors to make closing remarks, and please try and keep it short, so that we can close in a few minutes. Mambi Tumelo, I think I saw you wanted to say something.
We really thank you, and we hope that the book will be a solace that comes out of COVID-19. You'll read the story, how we put it together. And these are some of the good things that came out in this period of the pandemic. Whilst we were losing our loved ones, we lived under this cloak of COVID-19. It is work that continues, just like we say, a luta continua. Thank you.
Melo. Thank you. Ntate Mutobi Mutaute, do you want to say something?
Except to say, the picture tells 1,000 stories of the march. View it, interpret it, and then make your own interpretations or remarks. That's the approach.
Thank you, Dr. Toby. Pamela, do you want to say a few words before we call Dr. Nzenze to make closing remarks for us? Is Pamela still with us? Yes.
Thank you so much. It was easy, but we are here now. Malibongwe. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Professor Pumla Kola. Professor Kola.
Thank you very much for chairing, Chair, and thank you for hosting us. I don't really have much else to contribute. Thank you to everybody who came, and thank you again, Mom Sophie de Bruyn, for all of your work and your words and your generosity and the incredible example that you've given all of us. And I'm really happy to be reminded that you're a PE person, since I just started working in PE. I think now I'm going to drive everybody crazy and call it Sophie de Bruyn hometown and not PE anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So before I give over to Dr. Nzenze, Mam Rita, do you want to give us closing remarks?
My last word is, we have done it for so many years when we were inside and outside. We looked for a place where we can bring all our people together so that they can come up with solutions to show to show us, the elderly and the young, how we can come up. And we did it. Here we are, after so many years, after all the sorrows we endured from the national, what used to be called the National Party or something of the sort, where we used to scrub their floors and scrub their the pavement. But now we are all free. Thank you, many. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, my daughters. Oh, long live the daughters of Africa. Thank you. Long live. Amanda.
Amanda, Mama. Thank you, Mama Rita. Dr. Nzenze, I'll hand over to you to make the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair. It gives me a great joy to be giving the vote of thanks this evening, not least to thank you, since you cannot thank yourself. Chair us at the proceedings so well. I think I could describe this evening in many words: insightful, powerful, educational, inspiring, and that would be just the beginning. I want to especially, on behalf of the Director of JIAS, Dr. Ngolunga, to thank the contributors, to thank the stalwarts, Merita and Ms. Sophia de Bruyn, and their generation for all they've stood for and all that they represent for South Africa. I want to also thank the Vice Chancellor, Professor Chilizi Marwala, who gave the welcoming remarks earlier this evening, and to also thank the former President, Kgalema Motlanthe, who actually connected and brought together the editor of the book, or one of the leading editors of the book, Dr. Muthobi Mutlatse, Remutobi, together with the Vice Chancellor to work on this book. And he was quite adamant that it should be a UJ-owned project, that UJ should affiliate itself with this initiative. So we thank the former President, Kgalema Motlanthe. We also thank the lead editor and compiler of this volume, Mebo Tumelo Mufugeng, who, together with Dr. Muthobi Mutlatse and Dr. Thambile Masola, worked under enormous strain, along with their contributors, some of whom were with us today, but some of the others are otherwise engaged, no doubt in areas very much in line with this work. And so in that regard, I wish to thank Professor Phumla Gola for her remarks, Metoli Kunene, Aus Pamela Charekwa for their contributions as well as their reflections and insights into the process of compiling this book, especially under the conditions of the lockdown. And we very much congratulate them as the University of Johannesburg and as JIAS. I also then want to thank the organizers of these proceedings, the JIAS staff, as led by Dr. Molunga, the Executive Director of JIAS, and Vanessa Kennedy, the events manager at JIAS for putting together this launch. And with those words, ladies and gentlemen, keep well, and till we meet again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.